Like it, right? You like it?
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's the only thing I've had a reason to smile about in almost 3 weeks.
Well, we're actually live right now, so you can
Okay,
just get going.
then, ladies and gentlemen, it's Sunday, but not just any Sunday. It is the first. It is the Sunday after we finally decided to start streaming again. After we finally got over what happened on November the 5th, that quadra-annual opening of Hell's Gates we have to deal with, and then the next 4 years we have to try to close that damn thing again. But in order to do that, I wanted to do a quick one-act play. It's going to be very, very quick. From my our guest today, I apologize if I use a little salty language, but it's in my nature. So here
What did
we
you
are.
do?
I'm going to do the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross 5 Stages of Grief versus Election Day. Okay? All right, hold on a second. Let me get this right. Okay. Denial. Oh, fuck no. Realization. Oh, fuck no. Bargaining. Please. Fuck no. Acceptance. I'm skipping the other one. Acceptance. Oh, hell no. We're not going to accept this. We are at the cul-de-sac, guys. And that means that it's time to turn around and do things go back the way we came and try to get things done right. We'll explain that and more in today's rotation.
Nice.
Oh, boy, I got to tell you, we actually were. This is the first time we've actually been broadcasting now since the election because our software decided they weren't going to work for us anymore. That's one of the main things that's going to start tumbling down, and we just have to figure out exactly what happened, why it happened, and what we're going to do next. And that's basically where we stand. And in order to do that, we brought on a very special guest today. Let me just introduce ourselves, then I'll introduce him. I am, of course, Gary Stein, the Master of Public Health and Clinical Director of Suncoast Army.
They clapped. You can't hear the claps.
I didn't hear the clap. That's all right. That's the software. I'll work with it. And down below me here is our Deputy Director, our Master of Business Administration, and that's Carlos Angel Ermida. I threw out the Jose for whatever reason. And to our right side over there, coming to us from above the Beltway where he hits them below the Beltway, our Executive Director, Chris Cano. Chris, how things going over there in D.C.?
Oh, a lot to talk about today. Some recent cabinet picks for the Trump administration coming up. Folks need to know in regards to cannabis policy, and we'll be covering all that news later in today's show.
All right, great. Now, the first time that I came to Florida was in 1989, and that was when I was working with the Centers for Disease Control, and I believe we were under the Lawton Childs administration at that point in time. And so I figured let's find somebody who's been able to encapsulate what's been going on these last 35 years. Who better than somebody who's been working in the industry of journalism? That journalism meaning you actually journal what actually happens, not make things up or opinionize it all. Mike Deeson. Mike, so glad to have you here today.
Gary, I'm delighted to be here. Don't worry about the salty language. You should read my book. Bad news for you is good news for me. And in the preface, I apologize and say to my mom, if my mom was alive, she would frown on some of the language, but I just try to tell it like it was. So I have no problem with salty language, particularly with what happened just 2 weeks ago.
Well, I tried to keep my language down a bit. I mean, I was working for Centers for Disease Control. They were always kind of like watching what I was saying and that kind of thing. And then I went to my first lecture being given by John Morgan. And I realized in Florida, all the guardrails are gone as far as language is concerned. So I figured, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Fuck, cock, cunt. I just contribute.
Let's go back to the Lawton Child administration. Was that a switch, or was that just a continuation of a Democratic regime at that point?
No,
in time?
no. Lawton came in after Bob Martinez was the governor, and he had switched. Martinez, as you may recall, or maybe you don't, when he was mayor of Tampa, he was a Democrat, and he was called to the White House by Ronald Reagan and switched and became a Republican. And then he ran for governor and won, but he instituted a service tax in the first couple of months of his administration, because we didn't have an income tax in Florida. And it was probably the right thing to do, but there was so much opposition from the media because they would be taxed, from attorneys and all. They rescinded the tax. I can't recall, within months of it being instituted, and he became a lame duck governor, really, for the rest of his term. That really decimated his ability to do anything. And then Lawton Childs had been in the Senate and was tired of the Senate. He didn't like it. It moved so slowly and all. So he ran and then defeated Bob Martinez, the former Tampa mayor.
And of course, he famously also got the tobacco companies to come to their knees, so to speak, and it went through that and started taking all that great money that was supposed to be used towards taking care of tobacco-related industries, which since that time has been, I would say, stolen by the legislature.
Absolutely,
for everything else.
Absolutely. So, but Childs was a great guy, honestly. Great sense of humor. Really tried to move the state forward. It's amazing to me. I moved to Florida in 1982, and at that time, the Democratic primary was the election. I mean, this was such a blue state. It is amazing how poorly the Democrats have done in keeping the state blue. And the Republicans, got to give them credit, have done a great job in registering so many people as Republicans. But the Democrats just blew it. Totally blew it.
Now, Bob Graham had all of his great things where he would go and work with everybody else and things of that sort. And Lawton Childs also tried to make certain he knew everything about the people who worked here in Florida.
Oh yeah,
let me tell you away from all that.
Let me tell you about Graham. I love Graham. He was quirky. He kept little notebooks, spiral notebooks in his pocket, and wrote down every minute of every day. And if I would do an interview with Graham on, say, Thursday, Monday I would get a letter with the seal of the governor. And, dear Mike, it was great talking to you on Thursday. Thank you for asking a question about whatever it was. And he would tell a little more. Signed, Bob Graham, governor. Did that every time I interviewed him. He was a terrific guy, just a terrific guy.
The last time I saw him was in 2018. He was over at, what's his name, Chuck Todd's house over in Pensacola Beach, because his daughter was running for CD1 at the time. And he asked me about cannabis, and he asked me about why it should be medically thing. And I started talking. He said, "Wait a minute," and he pulled a little spiral notebook out of his pocket and started writing.
That was
and I
him.
thought that was so fascinating at the time. I think we're going to miss him.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we missed a lot of the gentility. I think that went on at that point in time. Oh, how the mighty have fallen! I would just say.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a young guy here, being that I'm only 41, but I do have some fond memories of some of these folks. I had the opportunity in 2009 to intern in the state legislature and represent USF in the Tallahassee internship program. And I remember in 2012 going to Disney World to one of those Democratic state party conferences, and it was a hot summer. I was wearing an all-white three-piece suit, and Bob Graham walks up to me and he just dust the dirt off my shoulder and goes, "Looking clean, son." And it was one of those touching moments where you don't expect a guy who's been in the U.S. Senate or governor just to be a down to earth person. So, and I think that's part of the luster that we've lost, in politics in a lot of ways is folks have now become social media personalities rather than down to earth people in a lot of ways. And, it's become more about followers and Twitter posts and such. And people just, it seems like folks don't have the social skills anymore. It's more of a online persona that they have. Mike, how do you see politics, navigating now in this new, medium of social media. It feels a lot like, folks have lost just civility with each other. Everybody's everybody's really keyboard brave, but in-person coward these days. And at the same time, the politicians seem to have changed too.
Well, clearly, social media is driving the younger folks who vote. My kids, my son's in his 40s, my daughter's in her 30s. They don't watch TV news. They get it all off of TikTok or social media. The influence of TV news has dropped, and of newspapers as well. And you are so right. It is so angry on social media that it drives a wedge between the left and the right. And there's no room for compromise in the middle because people get entrenched in that. And then the politicians feed off of that. And so I see it only getting worse. Things like podcasts and things like this hit more kids and I say kids, I'm talking about people in their 40s and 30s than well, I'm old, so okay. But it certainly is where the influence is these days, and the Democratic Party has got to hop on board to counteract these right-wing podcasts that have become so influential.
Well, I found it interesting. I watched the Joe Rogan Experience for many years now, not because I'm a right winger, but I found it entertaining in a lot of ways with some of the guests and such. And what I've seen is it is production value wise, one of the more popular podcasts on how they utilize social media. Everything from, making 30-second soundbite clips of a 2.5-hour podcast to just, the way they kind of make it more intimate with the guests and such, and the level of guests. And I've tried to model that with Carlos and Gary here on the rotation. And, I see how successful they've been. And one of the things this election cycle that struck me was they invited Kamala Harris to talk about marijuana legalization on the Joe Rogan podcast, and she passed up on it. And I just have to think that maybe it wasn't a personal choice, but that the Democratic consultants around her really failed her in making her come to their media platforms that matter, like you said, because Bernie Sanders did the podcast, and he was kicking ass in the polls because of it.
Yeah, I thought that was a mistake, but she said she couldn't commit 3 hours to doing it. She said she'd do an interview with him, but he wanted 3 hours with her, and she turned it down. I thought that was a mistake, but the consultants get in the way all the time and make people different than they really are. They're just horrible. The best politicians are the ones that listen to their gut. You've got to listen to your gut and screw the consultants who tell you.
With all due respect, I think the big tall guy with the white hair. What was his name? It's been a while since he was governor. He always listened to his gut. It didn't help him.
The big tall guy with the white hair. You mean
who are you talking about?
Our ex-governor who started a Republican, went independent to run for senator, and lost as governor.
Oh, you're talking about Charlie.
Oh, Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie. I wasn't going to say chain gang, Charlie. I was just going to throw it out there.
I was like, wait, what? We've had a lot of tall white guys with white hair as governor of Florida.
Yeah, you're right. That's like most of our legislature.
Yeah.
I think the Democrats are making a pretty strong failure as far as marketing is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Democrats, I have this ideal view of what society is, and it's like, they assume that voters are going to do the right thing and look at platforms and look at what people like Mike said, they go with their gut, and they're going to vote for who's relatable rather than who's has the best platform, unfortunately. So I think that's one thing that the Democrats need to do. There's got to be somebody out there that's just like fucking cool and like into it's hard for me to listen to somebody say, oh well, politics is about going with your gut, right? Rather than being logical and being like a good leader and like, you know what I mean? Like, and reasoning things out. I would assume that's the way that society would go, but we're fucking Americans where that's not true.
I don't see voters as altruists. I see voters as narcissistic. They basically vote for the things that they feel are important to them and screw everybody else. And for those people who want to be single issue voters, that really does act
It's like,
myopically.
say, for example, people who own hemp stores.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to vote against Amendment 3 because it's bad for their business, but they claim that they love the plant and that nobody should get arrested for the plant. And they're willing to ignore the thousands of people that get arrested every year because they want to keep money selling THCA and CBD. You know,
Now,
and
full disclosure, Mike, you do have some business.
We have a green medical a clinic. We help people get their cards in Florida, and Mike, let me tell you two really quick stories. We have a patient who is 91 years old. And she did not want to come to us, but she had glaucoma, and her ophthalmologist sent her to us because she was going blind. She comes back 7 months later, as they're required to do, and she turns to our doctor, and she's also from Germany. She goes, "Doctor, I don't understand. I went to my ophthalmologist, and he said I'll outlive my blindness. The pressure has gone down so much." And he said, "Do you use the cannabis every day?" And she says, "Well, I do all my chores, and then I take the drops." She does the tinctures under her tongue. She says, "Just in case I go crazy." And he goes, "Have you ever gone crazy before?" And she says, "No." She said, but she said, "I just don't want to become a druggie." But but she outlived her blindness. The other story is we had a patient right when we started who comes in and says, "I think I'm going to kill myself." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he was a disabled vet that had all these aches and pains from service-related things. He was going to the VA, and their answer was to give him oxycodone. And he said, I have to take more and more oxy, and I'm afraid I'm going to overdose. 7 months later, he comes back in again and says, "I haven't had an oxy in 5 months." And now when I say, he says, "I don't even take Advil or anything like that. The cannabis saved my life." So these stories need to be out there rather than the crap they put on the air with our taxpayer money that DeSantis ran those ads that I think violated state law. But there are real medical benefits to it. And plus, alcohol is 10 times worse from a health standpoint than cannabis. But the alcohol industry obviously fights any legalization of cannabis. It cuts into their profits. So we get back to what you said initially, Gary, that the way people vote is for a narcissistic ability to protect themselves.
Yeah, we had Jason Pizzo on a couple of weeks ago, and he actually is suing the state of Florida for using taxpayer dollars to defeat a people-started initiative. But then again, we have seen over the years that the legislature has done more and more to prevent the people from being to actually change the laws like they're supposed to have. I mean, we actually created that Constitutional Revision Committee so that every 20 years the public can have some kind of say in the Constitution. But they messed that up too, didn't they?
Well, they stacked it with such right-wing people on that Constitutional Revision Committee. It wasn't a balanced. It wasn't a committee of the people. It was a committee of right-wing people who wanted to tighten the state constitution. The other thing I'll say about that, remember, medical marijuana failed the first time it was on the ballot. Yeah. And then it passed again. And the fact that we have to have a 60% threshold is crazy. If you guys recall, when that was on the ballot, it didn't get 60% of the vote. So it was a simple majority that increased the threshold. It would not have passed under the current rules, which say you have to have a 60%, which just is just so ironically crazy.
Especially when you think about the fact that the 60% threshold was created to get rid of the possibility of having any more fetal pig cage bills.
Right.
Is that anywhere else in the country? Does anybody else have a
Florida's
60?
unique.
I don't believe so. I don't know off the top of my head anybody that does that.
Why do I fucking live here?
Was there that much outrage over the fetal pig cage bill that they felt they had to shut off the people's voices?
Gary, it was about corporate interest in this state. Florida allows businesses to donate to state campaigns, and I just pulled up here the major corporations that were behind that 60% amendment. And I mean, I'm reading here: Anheuser-Busch, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Chico's, Crystal Springs, Florida Crystals, King Ranch, MacArthur Farms, the National Apartment Association, Pepsi Cola. These are the companies that donated tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to make sure that 60% amendment passed. What was that, back in 2004, Mike? I mean, that's
yeah, I think that was it. I think it was 2004. Yeah.
And it's made it that much harder for us to pass things. But I don't want to use the 60% threshold as a crutch to explain Amendment 3's failure, because $140 million was spent by the Smart and Safe campaign. And one of the issues that I had with it was the people that they chose to put in charge of that campaign. The consulting firm was a right-wing consulting firm that they utilized that ran Ted Cruz's presidential campaign. So, I mean, if it's not like they have a track record for victory.
Yeah.
And one thing that I saw that was very different on the Amendment 2 side of the campaign versus this one was Amendment 2, although the consultants racked up a lot of money, they did give a small pittance to a ground game. I was actually a field organizer for Amendment 2 in 2016. I made $400 every 2 weeks to work 7 days a week, 16-hour days collecting petitions.
Wow.
And I can tell you that it was not a fun time. At one point, I even got heat exhaustion, standing out in front of the Tampa Convention Center all day in front of Comic-Con to get petitions signed. But the point was that there was at least some type of ground game, and I can't recall any ground game at all of knocking on doors and getting people, non-typical voters, off the couch to go vote for something that I'm pretty sure they would have voted for.
I remember thinking that. I remember being upset at the United for Care campaign that they were doing too much groundwork and not investing anything in like TV ads or anything like that. And the Amendment 3 was all ads. It was all TV ads.
Well, Amendment 2 didn't even have any TV ads until about Halloween.
Yeah.
in 2014. And I thought that was kind of a bad move to actually have no huge public campaign up until the last moment. And that was part of the reason that they lost, to be honest with you. They really didn't publicize it. Although, think about it, how much did John Morgan put into Amendment 2 in 2014? I think it was $8 million, and then he put in 20 more million. This is multiplied by 10, and they still didn't make the threshold. So what was the difference there between Amendment 2 and Amendment 4? I mean, first off, we had the idea that we're talking about medicinal cannabis, which, be honest with you, we still don't have a medicinal program here in Florida. It's quasi-adult use or quasi-recreational. Because if you go into a dispensary, you realize that nobody there is thinking about you in a medicinal manner. They'll tell you, this will get you high, this will get you stoned, this will put you in the couch, this will make your mother think you're your father, whatever. But the fact is, they aren't treating you like a medical. If you go in there and say, I have a terrible migraine headache, which one of these products is best for it? You'll look at you with a deer in the headlights kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, also they're using botanical insecticides that, although might be good for industrial tobacco production, is not safe for someone who's suffering from lung cancer to ingest and inhale. And I've been highly critical of the fact that the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Health have let some of these insecticides and other botanical pesticides, slide in the Florida medical marijuana industry. It doesn't, like you said, Gary, seem very medical at all in a lot of ways. And then there's no boutique strains. There's no ability for someone to get a clone and grow their own in a way that they need it. Carlos and I used to teach classes on, medical marijuana industry and patient care. And, there's certain strains in other states, certain cultivars that work for folks, whether it's Harlequin or Black Widow. And you don't necessarily get that in Florida. You just get whatever, Verano, Move, or True Leave or Cure Leave, whatever their flavor of the day is, and whatever crop that is that didn't fail that they're pushing out.
I think if you want to distance yourself from the street dealer, the legacy market, as it were, those guys, when you go up to them, they'll say, "Yeah, this is what you have. What you can get from me. What I got and what I have."
Right.
It's not necessarily what you need. So I think it's about time we start fixing the program we have. I think at this point in time, because of the fact that Amendment 3 did not pass, it's a good time to take a step back and get the medical program done right while we're waiting for the next election to come by and we're waiting for the next huge changeover in the midterms, which I truly expect. Do you see that a lot in Florida as well as national, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you look at the cabinet picks, the Trump administration is going to be a disaster, and it's going to be a very painful 2 years. Just ludicrous. The sad thing, and listen, I think that Matt Gaetz is disgusting, but he was very pro-cannabis legalization. That's the only good thing I can say about Matt Gaetz. Oh, and here's an irony. His dad, Don Gaetz, is back in the legislature. He was sort of forced out under a cloud of, corruption or something. His dad, just this week, was named head of the ethics committee. That just, I saw that come up. Are you kidding me? But anyway, I think it's going to be tough. I don't think Pam Bondi will be as friendly to legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana. And let me say this about Pam as the pick. There's the problem with the $25,000 that Trump gave to her for her campaign when she dropped the charges against Trump University or didn't pursue it. Secondly, she said that she was a prosecutor for 18 years. That's crap. This is a wild story. Before she was elected Attorney General for Florida, I knew that she did not spend any time in the courtroom because she was the public information officer for the Hillsborough Sheriff's Office. So I made a public records request for the amount of trials where she was the lead counsel. I got it on the Friday at 5 o'clock before the election. So Monday, I get a call about 2 o'clock. On the phone is Pam Bondi, openly weeping. She says, "Mike," and she's crying and trying to catch us up. I'm in the Panhandle campaigning. I'm in a stall in the woman's room. You're not going to run that story tonight, are you? And I said, "No, Pam, your guys slow walked it." I couldn't run a story like that the night before the election in good conscience. Now, if she'd been caught with a 17-year-old, oh, no, that's Gates. I'm sorry. But like that, we would have run it, but I didn't. But honestly, openly, but she wasn't a prosecutor. She was that, and she's an election denier. But I guess that's part of the criteria for being Trump's cabinet and all. But I don't think she will be friendly toward the cannabis movement.
No, when she was on
actually had attorney generals in the past that actually had a spine, that actually did work independently of the governor's office. I think Charlie Crist was one of them. But we and Butterworth, that kind of that stuff. We actually had attorney generals that actually did more than just being the lackey for the governor. When Pam Bondi served, she served at the pleasure of Rick Scott and did everything that he asked her to do and nothing more.
Same with
didn't
Ashley
see anything
Moody.
more.
Ashley Moody, I was one of the moderators on a debate when she was running against Sean Shaw. And her whole pitch that time was he's going to politicize this office and blah, 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 all these liberal views. I will be calling balls and strikes and be the attorney. That is such a lie. She is one of the most active attorney generals. Her husband, again, is in law enforcement, keep in mind. And I think with the DEA. Although I'm not sure, but I think he's a DEA agent. I may be wrong on that. My mind gets clouded. But she has been an activist attorney general as well, and just a bald-faced liar, because she said she wouldn't do that, and she does it all the time. So yeah, the attorney generals in Florida are actively working for the governor, and now Pam Bondi will actively work for Trump. And she has said, since her nomination became public, she will go after those who prosecuted Trump. She will go after the prosecutors and the investigators. Wow. It's really scary. It is really, really scary. But then we can go down the list of the cabinet people. Tulsi Gabbard, geez.
Well, I was under, okay, so with all these cabinet picks, I was pretty outraged at first, but then I came to under the realization recently that they don't necessarily have to be good. I mean, Linda McMahon, Elon Musk, they don't have to be good at government jobs. I think they're not there to be good politicians, but they're there to fucking gut these departments.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Carlos. No question about it.
So then my question to you guys is that Trump guts the shit out of the government, right? What does that look like for cannabis legalization?
Well, Carlos, that's a good point. I mean, you got to think the
part of the set us back, or are we actually moving forward in that regard?
Well, part of the holdup on legalization has been a lot of the bureaucracy at the DEA. In 1988, when the DEA administrative law judge ruled in a case that Normal filed in 1972, it took 12 years for a ruling on it, on the original petition, that cannabis has medical value. And then the DEA ignored it pretty much, and didn't recommend rescheduling. Here we have a rescheduling hearing. And in the course of this whole rescheduling hearing, we've seen the smart approaches to marijuana uses DEA connections to put his thumb on the scale, and prohibitionists have been essentially selected to testify. Normal hasn't even been selected to testify in the DEA hearing. When we were one of the original petitioners for the first time we saw rescheduling, and we've been representative and supportive of folks who've requested it before. So, I'm a public administrator. I got my MPA, and for me, I was specifically educated onto how to be a good bureaucrat. That there is essentially a fourth branch of government, the bureaucracy, but that bureaucracy at times screws up. It's too bureaucratic. It's too much red tape. At other times, that is the only safeguard the American people have to protect themselves from corporations that only have a profit motive and not their safety. We see it with Trump in his first administration cutting back on food inspectors, and now you see listeria outbreaks at Boar's Head. You see E. coli outbreak in the ground beef all across the country. I mean, deli meat's not safe to eat. They're finding human DNA in hot dogs. So these are the consequences of gutting government regulators. These are the consequences of letting the inmates run the asylum.
Well, what does that mean? It's like weed could be legalized soon, but if you smoke it, it'll kill you? Or
that is exactly what a valid conclusion, Carlos.
Well, Mike, how often has corporate interests literally controlled the policy in Florida?
Oh, wow. It goes back, I think, to like when Rick Scott, Jeb, okay. I had a lot of disagreements with Jeb, but he was an adult. He was an adult. He was a hard worker, and he fought some of the corporate interests. He went his own way. I mean, Jeb at the legislature fought a lot of the time. Rick Scott the guy that should have been in prison, who took the fifth 75 times for the biggest Medicare fraud that was ever perpetrated in the country. And then so he was all for let the corporations come in and tell us what they want and we'll get it done. I think that was where it really changed in Florida.
I mean, Johnson & Johnson is one of the few corporations I can honestly say somewhat acts altruistically. They did not so much when they had the baby powder suit, but for the most part, they're one of the very few corporations that I see that actually is thinking about their consumers and not just themselves, in the hopes that if they take care of the consumers will take care of them.
So, sorry about my dogs. I try to mute when they bark.
Oh, you have a mute button for the bark, or a bark button, like we have a cough button?
That's it, a bark button.
Just let the dog bark. He wants we legalize too.
Yeah, that's right. That's what she's saying. It's amazing that the VA needs to be able to prescribe medical marijuana. There are so many veterans that have PTSD, and marijuana obviously helps with that, but they can't do it because it's still classified as a Schedule I drug. I think that there is hope that will change, even with the Trump administration.
Well, Mike, I got to say, I'm not optimistic because the VA pick that Trump put in charge voted against allowing veterans administration doctors to recommend marijuana when he was in Congress. So
I didn't realize that.
But I did want to show folks, I have a breaking picture from Rick Scott's trial, and I just wanted to show folks real quick. That's Rick Scott there.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Like Rick Scott is Dave Chappelle. What the? I really don't know anything about politics.
Okay, obviously the election is what it is, and I actually contacted Craig Latimer, his good friend, who was our supervisor of elections here in Hillsborough County, who took over for a very good friend of mine, Philip Wyshansky, when she passed away some years ago. And I asked him, how was the election in Hillsborough? How is it that Hillsborough went from blue to red this election? And he said, well, we did the audit, and if you want me to be on the show, we'll talk about it. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it, so he sent me the press release in regards to the election, saying they finished the audit. It was perfect. Everything went exactly as it was supposed to. People who voted got a chance to vote, and the counting was all perfect. So what happened? What happened? Let's start with at home. What happened in Hillsborough County?
Well, the Hillsborough Democratic Party is in shambles. I mean, the chair is not running for re-election. Thank goodness. But she controlled, as a dictator, the Democratic Party in Hillsborough, and she was incompetent. They ran that Andrew Warren lost to Susie Lopez is just disgusting. Just absolutely disgusting. But they ran a terrible campaign in Hillsborough County. It started with the previous election when county commission turned more red. There's a lot of work that has to be done in Hillsborough and the state. I think Nikki Fried is trying to turn things around statewide, but there's a lot of work that has to be done, and it really needed to start on Wednesday. Or maybe Thursday. Wednesday, we could all be sick to our stomach. And then Thursday, seriously, then we need, there's so much work that has to be done. And I'm hoping that as bad as the Trump administration will be, some folks will go, oh, no, I can't deal with this. But we got to get in Hillsborough a chairperson who works and understands people and gets Democrats excited again and will work the polls and all. That's my thought on that.
Mike, I concur 110%. I've been involved in the Hillsborough County Democratic Party since being elected a precinct captain in 2008. In 2016, the current chair, who you just gave your critique of, tried to kick me out of the party because I was not going to fall lockstep in line, and I continued to criticize Hillary Clinton's points up until the convention. And I just, it is what it is. I mean, they tried to throw me out the party for making a social media post criticizing Hillary Clinton for pandering, saying that she admires Kim Kardashian. I'm like, that's not how you get millennial votes.
Right.
I mean, I'll grant you, Hillary Clinton, during her campaign, I saw her twice during the campaign. Once was at Pasco County Hernando College, which was a great view. But before that, it was basically her talking to large donors in millionaires' homes and things of that sort. And that didn't go over that well because she didn't get the populist vote. And I think she lost at that point in time as far as Hillsborough was concerned and as far as Florida was concerned. So we're at this thing which I call the cul-de-sac moment, where you realize you've hit the end of the street and there's nothing you can do but turn around and find your way back to civilization. So what do we do here? What has been done in the past when elections have not gone well? How do we turn things around, or do we just flounder until we find our way?
Well, if we flounder until we find our way, it's going to be disastrous. It's a lot of work on the street. You've got to go out and organize people, get people excited, find candidates that people like, that are good on media and that can relate to people, to the working class guys. You got to shake hands. You got to press the flesh. Politics is, despite all the ads and all the media, you got to get your base excited, that will then go out like throwing a rock in the pond and will spread out and get more people involved. If we don't put in the hard work, we flounder around and do the woe is me thing, the election results are going to be the same.
Yeah. And I think
I've talked to a lot of Republicans.
Hold up, Barry. I got an important point here. No, I think before you do anything like that, though, I think the Democratic Party needs to sit down and really take a hard look at its demographic, if you will, and really like put some interest in how to communicate and relay messages to these people, because I think that was the main issue. I mean, the amount of Latino voters that voted for Trump, the amount of Black voters that voted for Trump, the amount of gay voters that voted for Trump is insane. I think that stems from an absolute failure from the party to say, hey, listen, we're not the ones that know everything. All right, we need to take a moment and look at the people that we're trying to reach and see how we can relate a message to them. It's marketing 101. You study your demographic, you tailor your message for your demographic, you send that message out. I think that was a big failure with the Kamala campaign, and I think that's something that the Donald Trump campaign actually did without realizing it. I think there's so much stuff out there of Trump just saying shit that a Latino person that, is at risk of being deported now that Trump is in office, right, can look at this guy and say, no, I heard Trump say something before, 2 years ago that, makes me feel like he's not going to deport me.
Yeah, but Carlos, the thing, it's still James Carville, who can be crazy at times. I've known him forever. When he ran his first campaign in Virginia, a Senate campaign, and I was working there, he was right. The most precise statement he ever made was, "It's the economy, stupid." The price of gas and eggs, no matter, the Biden economy was great. We're the envy of the world. But to the working class person who maybe doesn't have a ton of money in the stock market or any money in the stock market, the fact that the stock market has gone through the roof doesn't mean anything to them. But all they know is when they go to Publix and buy eggs, or they go fill up their car, it costs a hell of a lot more. And that was a hard thing to overcome. It really was.
And regards to the Hispanics, I'm sorry, Carlos, I gotta say this, because I've talked to a lot of folks from various parts of the world who are Hispanic, both from Europe and from South America and Central America, who think that now that they're here, that they're not the people that Trump is talking about, but he is talking about them, with the exception of the people of Puerto Rico, which I think Trump now realizes are actually Americans. He is planning on getting rid of anybody in this country who he thinks is Hispanic and go on from there. He's used such a broad brush that those folks who say this does not apply to me, so I'm going to vote for Trump, didn't do themselves any service.
Well, Gary, here's the thing. Yes, there are ignorant, miseducated voters out there. The Democratic Party, though, has clearly failed to hit a softball, right? Like they had a softball in all of this, in the sense that they're supposed to position themselves as the party of the working class. Kamala Harris was advocating for $6,000 child credit, $25,000 down payment assistance, and somehow a $1,200 check that Trump gave people 4 years ago resonated more than that. That clearly, as Carlos pointed out, was a messaging and marketing failure. I was knocking doors in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, talking to union voters. And I found a demographic shift in that pretty much every union guy over the age of 30 who was white was not voting on the union slate. So that tells me that there is something about working class people and what Mike was saying in their personal economic struggles. Even though the economy is better than it's been in a very long time, I saw every Republican on social media put, "Are you better than where you were 4 years ago?" And every time I see it, I would put, "Yes, I make triple than what I made 4 years ago. I'm doing great. My family's doing great." But the fact is that for a mass majority of people, they're not. And the Democratic Party somehow allowed a billionaire funded by billionaires who want to cut government services that help the working class. They fucked that up. I'm sorry, but there's no other way for me to say it. At the national level, at the state level, at the local level, the Democrats have fucked it up. And it is so easy that they basically had a bongo bat hitting the softball, and they managed to fuck that up.
This goes back to what I was saying, though. This goes back to what I was saying, and to feed off of what Gary was saying, actually. The Hispanic vote is actually a small demographic of the Latino vote, right? The Latino vote is basically the whole shebang. But like, for example, I come from a Hispanic Latino family. I don't have any Afro Latino in my blood. I don't have any Native in my blood. Everything that I from my family goes back to Hispaniola. And as you guys are familiar with my father and mother are very comfortable voting for Trump. Right. Thinking that he represents us because we're European descent. I tell you, I try to delineate a difference between my family and white people. And my parents are like, hold on. We're from Europe. OK. There are a lot of different demographics within the Latino vote, and the Democratic Party failed to reach out to each one of those demographics. They failed to reach out to the Afro-Latino voters. They failed to reach out to the Native Latino voters. And a lot of people in that demographic, I hate to say it, but it comes back from growing up in these countries, are self-hating. There's a lot of racism in these countries against Afro-Latinos. There's a lot of racism in these countries against Native Latinos. And a lot of times, right, these people will be willing to vote for the Hispanic, the people that vote appeal to the Hispanics if nobody's reaching out to them.
Another mother is a black Dominican, and she voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Case in point.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
But part of the problem is the people who didn't vote. If the same amount of Democrats had come out in this election that came out in 2020, she'd be president right now. The Democrats didn't get the vote out. Again, that's the organization of the party. But really, if they had not stayed home, she would be president right now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel as though we could turn this into a 3-hour podcast and show on this. But Mike, I know you got a busy Sunday ahead of you. Carlos is actually hosting a Friendsgiving. So, Mike, why don't you just kind of share with the folks watching at home your final thoughts on the election, and also how they can continue to support the amazing decades of investigative journalism that you've done and continue to do, on the behalf of the people.
Well, thanks. Look, I'm very disappointed with the election. But we have got to go to work and call out as the loyal opposition every time they do something stupid. And they are going to do horrible, horrible things. And we have got to point it out. It's the media's obligation to point that out every time they do something stupid. I think also, just on the cannabis end, we have got to get out the stories like my 91-year-old lady whose eyesight was saved by cannabis, and the veteran who got off oxycodone. I mean, in 4,000 years of marijuana, as you guys know, there have been 0 deaths caused by marijuana. So that story has got to get out there. But we have a existential crisis facing democracy in this country, and we have got to stand up to it. I am frightened what these people are going to do, but I'm hoping that in 2 years, people will say, no mas, I've seen this, but it won't happen unless we work our butts off to try to turn this around. We're in for some scary, tough times, but I think we'll make it through. I hope.
Have we turned it around before? That's the last question I have for you.
We have turned it around before. Look at when Reagan. Well, let's go back. First of all, when Barry Goldwater lost to Lyndon Johnson. I mean, he was decimated by Johnson, and the Republican Party, they were saying, is dead. The Democrats will rule forever. Well, that certainly didn't happen. By 1968, there's Nixon in there. And then with the Democrats, when Reagan had his whole regime in there, they said the Democrats are now dead. And then Bush won in the first term, and then Bill Clinton came through, and then the Democrats came back. The pendulum goes back and forth, and I think it can be turned around, but not just by wishing it; it's by working it. That's my thought.
I'm going to come with a couple of electric paddles and see if I can't jumpstart the hearts of the Republicans in the majority over there, because something's got to move a supermajority to actually think somewhat along the lines of what we're thinking about, and not just what leadership is putting out.
Absolutely. Hey, it's been great being with you guys. This was a fun discussion. We feel, like you say, we could do it for hours, but it was terrific. I really enjoyed talking to you guys.
And later we'll talk about how we can change Raymond James Stadium to Leroy Selman Stadium. I think it's about time.
Hey, I'm with you, Garrett. Carlos, with that, I think it's time for the news, buddy.
It's time for the news, man.
All right, so let's start with the normal news. One interesting thing coming out of Canada, according to data in the Journal of Drug Issues, is that of an estimated 25% of Canadians between ages of 55 and 65 acknowledge having consumed cannabis in the past year. Researchers affiliated with the Canadian Center on Substance Use and Addiction analyzed cannabis use data in older adults for the 4-year period immediately following legalization. 2/3 of older consumers reported cannabis improves or helps them manage physical health conditions like chronic pain, depression, anxiety, and sleep disturbances. Shocker there. Now, looking at where we're at in America, we always hear about we need more research. We need more research. Well, at the state level, we're starting to see something happen. The University of Illinois has opened their state's first ever cannabis research institute for the purpose of providing unbiased, rigorous, equity-centric research center, advancing public knowledge about all the aspects of cannabis and hemp. And their institute is funded by a 3-year, $7 million grant from the Illinois Department of Human Services. Several other states, including California, Colorado, Kentucky, Minnesota, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Utah, and our very own Florida, have similarly established or in the process of establishing state-sponsored institutions to study the safety and efficacy of cannabis. Some of these programs have even conducted FDA-approved clinical trials documenting cannabis's efficacy in the various patient populations. So, we're continuing to move forward with that. Now, if you want to talk about research, there's been data that's been published in the Journal of Frontiers in Cardiovascular Medicine that show that a lifetime of cannabis use is not associated with elevated risk of hypertension. I recall when Gary Johnson was running for president, and there was someone on stage who said that cannabis can cause an increase in heart attack, and he fakes a heart attack on stage as she makes these sensational claims. But researchers at the University of California, San Diego, assessed the relationship between cannabis smoking and systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure, pulse pressure, and hypertension in an ethnically diverse sample of adults that were averaged about 74 years old, and no associations were found between a history of regular cannabis smoking, duration or recency of smoking, and either systolic, diastolic, or pulse pressure, or the prevalence of hypertension, as the researchers reported. If you want to case in point, you could look at folks in their 80s and 90s like Tommy Chong and Willie Nelson. I've not seen those guys killing over from heart attacks. Now, as we look at the fact that elections matter, in California, the Oakland City Council has advanced a proposal that will exempt cannabis from their residential smoking ban. The council decided 6-0 in support of an exemption, which was supported by California Normal. Shout out to Dale and Ellen, who run California Normal in this bill. And the final vote will be actually taken on December 3rd. Unlike tobacco, cannabis is illegal to consume in any public place in California, and as a result, a ban on residential smoking effectively leaves folks in Oakland who don't have their own houses with no place to legally inhale cannabis, even if it's for medical purposes. And so, cannabis smoke does not pose the same potential respiratory risk as tobacco smoke. And I think that's a case in point that we need to push back on here in Florida, as we've seen Senator Grutter say he wants to move forward with a public smoking ban. Except, of course, cigars are exempt. So that's definitely important to remember. Remember, I said that elections matter, and I'm pointing this out because voters in Colorado Springs actually decided on a pair of municipal ballot measures that have paved the way for licensed retail sale of adult use cannabis products within the city limits. And then they decided 55 to 45%, not that bullshit 60% threshold that we need in Florida, which authorizes the existing medical dispensaries to sell their cannabis products to adults. Shocker that for 10 years they've had legal cannabis in Colorado, and in Colorado Springs they don't have retail sales. I found that kind of strange in a lot of ways when I visited Colorado a couple summers back, but it is what it is. And so moving forward, we'll definitely see what's going to happen. Now, they did have another separate ballot measure which sought to impose a permanent citywide ban on adult use marijuana sales, and that measure failed by a margin of approximately 1%. So they voted 55 to 45 in favor of adult use sales for medical dispensaries, but they only managed to defeat, essentially 49 to 51% when it comes to banning adult use sales. Elections matter, folks. You got to vote. You also got to be an educated voter and read the fine print and all of that. So, as we start to close out, I do want to say an interesting study that is coming out of the journal Pain Practice in the United Kingdom is that patients diagnosed with chronic pain conditions report sustained improvements in their symptoms following the use of medical cannabis. Again, this is not a shocking thing. Time and time again, the research points clearly cannabis helps with a variety of conditions. And to hear politicians say, oh, we just don't have enough research is a Class A bullshit line that you're going to continue to hear in the Florida legislature and in Congress, and you should not believe it because clearly the science points the other way. Now, as we talk about bullshit and politicians, Trump has made several picks for things that have to do with cannabis, in particular the Surgeon General appointment he's made. He's made Health and Human Services appointment, VA nominations, the FDA, the CDC. Some of these folks, I'm sad to say, I'm not, the next Surgeon General that he's appointed, she's a USF grad. Go Bulls. but she also went to medical school in the Caribbean. Not to dissuade that, but we all know that Caribbean medical schools are where you go when you can't get into a U.S. medical school because you don't have good enough test scores in a lot of ways. Let's be real. And she's a Fox News host. I'm just saying, maybe the Surgeon General shouldn't be a TV host. That's all, But I do got to applaud him, the FDA commissioner. Dr. Marty Markey is a surgical oncologist at Johns Hopkins University, and he's a Nobel winner for being able to do kidney transplants. He's a frequent Fox News host, a guest on different Fox News programs. But of course, obviously, that seems to be the only way Trump's getting any type of decent folks. Is whoever's been on Fox News, that's who he wants to go with. He said that the greatest perpetrator of misinformation has been the United States government's food pyramid, and I gotta agree with him. He's not wrong with that. So all in all, I think the FDA commissioner, not a bad pick. Now he's picked Dr. David Weldon to be the CDC director, and David Weldon's an Army veteran and a Republican congressman who served from 95 to 2009. We'll see how all these things shake out. I mean, obviously he's congressman from Florida, and he wants to work with the CDC to enact a ban on patents for human embryos. There's definitely a lot of things that might see folks address when it comes to chronic disease epidemics, and obviously how COVID was carried out. We'll see how all of this shakes out with these appointments. I do want to give props on one appointment that I think might be solid, and that is Laurie Chavez DeRemer, who Trump has nominated for labor secretary. She was a congresswoman from Oregon who actually co-sponsored the HOPE Act alongside Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And she also co-sponsored a legalization framework with Hakeem Jeffries. So this is a Republican congresswoman who has been able to go across the aisle and has been endorsed by Normal and endorsed by the Last President Project and Americans for Prosperity. So she's got left-wing and right-wing endorsements. She's been someone who, has even gotten backing by the Teamsters. She's one of the only Republicans to sponsor the PRO Act and be pro-labor. So, as far as the cabinet picks go, I have seen a lot shittier cabinet picks, and this is one who Normal has supported and who supports cannabis. Maybe we can actually get a world where people don't get fired from their jobs for utilizing cannabis under this labor secretary. So, Carlos, you said earlier, you wonder about where we're going to go with things. And of course, anything is possible in if we just get it right. There's a lot to be said, in the upcoming term, the lame duck session that's happening. Chuck Schumer says he's going to continue to try and get the Safer Banking Act passed in the lame duck session. But of course, with Mike Johnson running the House, we'll see how things shake out. I would like to see a world where everybody has the right to grow their own medicine at home, where that if you need medical marijuana, your insurance pays for it. You don't get fired from your jobs. You don't lose any rights like your Second Amendment rights. You don't get kicked off an organ transplant. You don't have your kids taken away. This is the world that I want to see us live in, and those are the policies we're going to continue to advocate for. So, if you want to see that world, if you want to live in that world, we need your support. Become a member of Normal, become a member of Suncoast Normal, help us out in Florida. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast each and every week. Join us in the rotation each and every Sunday at 11 a.m. live. We're going to continue to bring you great special guests. Gary, Carlos, myself, as the masters of cannabis, are going to continue to bring you the news quick, dirty, and fast, so that way you can know the truth when it comes to cannabis policy. And we're going to bring you the latest in cannabis news and entertainment. But we can't do it without you. We're only as strong as our membership. So go to suncoastnormal.org, become a member today. Your little $25, all right, makes the world of difference in making sure that we have the resources necessary to educate the public, to go up to Tallahassee, educate our legislators. Gary needs gas money for the van to get to Tallahassee. And that's how we shake it out. None of us take a check to do this. We all do this as volunteers because we care so much about each and every one of you. But we need your time. We need your treasure. We need your talent if we're going to do this. So if you're interested in also volunteering, becoming a member of the board, right now, National Normal's accepting board nominations. Hit them up and see if you want to join the National Board of Normal and help steer things in the right direction. And of course, Suncoast Normal is always looking for more volunteers, more folks who want to become motivated and make things happen locally, both at the city, county, and state level in Florida. So we really do appreciate each and every one of you doing what we can to make us live in a better world where cannabis consumers are not discriminated against. And that's the normal news.
Now, I need to point out first off the nominee for the Surgeon General. I mean, for head of CDC, he does believe that vaccines cause autism. Okay, even though it's been debunked by so many major organizations across the world. So obviously, he's one of those ignorant ass people who don't believe the science because the science that they were told sounds better to them. And that is what we had to deal with in regards to so many of our legislators and the way that this whole medical program got laid out in the first place is because you had ignorant ass special interests giving ignorant ass legislators information, and then they pass it on to low information voters. You notice I didn't call them ignorant ass voters because that wouldn't be nice. But the point is, somewhere along the lines, you have to have somebody who knows their shit to give the information to the legislators so they can pass it along and make good legislative policy. Like, for instance, I have this book right here. It's one of my favorite books. It is about the marijuana papers. This has to do with the medical research that's been done since the 1800s, only up until 1972. Each one of these is a report on various research that's been done just during that time, and the amount of research that's been done since 1972 has been astronomically more. Yeah. And yet they still say there's not enough research to verify what we're saying. Well, we've done the research here at Suncoast Normal. We know what the shit we're talking about, and we are going to be educating the legislators, and we want to give you that information so you too can tell your legislators exactly what's what, so we can get things done, so we can get a situation where you have, if you're a medical patient, you have rights to be able to use your medicine. Especially if, say, for instance, you are a medical patient in a rehab facility with opioid poisoning, you should be allowed to use cannabis as a way to remediate it. That's actually in research that was done back in the 1800s and went on through the 1900s. So, and even on today, there's verification that happens. But in Florida, it's illegal to use cannabis in a rehab facility. Among those other things, you could also have your be knocked off the liver transplant list, etc. And again, we have a pathway to home grow. We didn't do it in the ballot measures this year because you couldn't put it on a ballot measure with adult use. It just plain could not be done with Florida law. And anybody who thinks that otherwise, well, then that's why we didn't hit 60%, pretty much. Yeah. Among other things.
Gary, I did see a comment in the chat. Does Normal have any subject matter experts in medical cannabis science and therapeutics? Actually, our Deputy Director, Paul Armentano, is one of the leading researchers in all of this and is a solid subject matter expert. He may not be a doctor, but the guy definitely is a solid researcher and has actually written books that Normal has available. If you go to normal.org, you can see much of the compilation of the research he's put together. You can even see the book that Normal has published in regards to cannabis science and therapeutics and the indications for using cannabinoids to treat a variety of illnesses and such. I actually have a copy somewhere in my home, and I'll show it to folks next week. But that there it is, Gary. Just put it up to the camera a little closer. The clinical applications for cannabis and cannabinoids, indeed. And shout out to Paul Armentano for putting that together with National Normal. And then again, in all of this, we could talk all day and continue to go on. The whole vaccines and autism thing. One thing that people miss in all of this, right? It's not that vaccines are causing autism. There are so many other environmental factors that the vast majority of us are oblivious to because of the way we go about our day. Like the fact that this little black screen kicks off more radiation than anything, and that children, when they're first born, have no natural defense to radiation in their immune system, especially among brain development. If you got one of these, go back and read what Steve Jobs said when he said he never wanted his kids to have an iPhone. And look at the dangers that it produces. I mean, I got friends that keep their smartphones on their front porch because they don't want their young kids being affected by the EM fields from it. All right. You got to think about the artificial food dyes and the artificial flavorings and preservatives that are in a lot of our processed foods. There are a lot of the baby foods that we give kids. So, time and time again, this whole vaccine and autism thing. Look, I'm a new parent. I'm wary about it all. When it comes to vaccinations, I make sure that my kid only gets one at a time and that we wait at least 2 weeks before we give them another one. Yeah, kids are getting vaccinated at higher rates than in foreign history. But that's also because science has advanced to the point where most of the diseases are curable with a vaccine at a young age. You know, you don't, if you go back to cemeteries and you walk through them, you don't see children dying in the vast numbers that they used to in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. The infant mortality rates aren't as bad as they should be. But at the same time, you got to look at some of these childhood diseases and look at the other factors that are being caused. And I just want to be clear: the one thing that is not causing birth defects is cannabis. That's all we got for today's show. We're gonna show a replay next weekend for doubleheader. So if you missed Friday's show with Morgan Fox from National Normal, who's our political director and lobbyist, or if you want to recap today's show next Sunday, you'll be able to watch that double feature. And we'll be back live with you all on December 8th with some special guests, bringing you each and every week some new guests. And I know we're going to have a new co-host when we come back on the 8th, joining Carlos in studio, and that'll be our events director, Carla. So we'll actually have a feminine element to it. Hopefully, Gary can keep a lid on the locker room jokes. As we have a lady joining us for the show. But Carla's all in good fun, and she's a great sport and an amazing member to our board. I just want to say thank you to her and all of our board members for the success of our Halloween party that we had at the Dignitary Cafe. It was a great fundraiser. Obviously, we had to do it after Halloween because of the hurricanes, but folks had a grand old time. Carlos, any feedback, anything you want to share on the amazing work that our board put together to make sure we pulled off that party?
It's just nice to see there's still a community out there, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's after losing Amendment 3, you get really discouraged. I at least do, but to be able to come together and to talk with like-minded people and to remember, you know, legalization and progress still has a future because, you know, the community is there, you know?
Yeah. Thank you to Ian Beckles and the Dignitary Cafe for giving us the location to host it and creating that space for the community. Shout out to Jungle Boys. Jungle Boys hosted the VIP lounge and provided VIP gift bags to all the folks who became normal members that night. And again, go to suncoastnormal.org, sign up to join our email list, become a member, and let's kick some ass moving into 2025 when it comes to legalization. Peace.
We can do it, guys. We can do it.